All right, welcome to X Garage. I'm Ethan, or O. Henry, your host, I guess, for this one. So we've got Chris Savino on today, and Chris is Chris Savino, right? That's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
Yeah, Chris Savino. I don't know if it's Italian or.
It is Italian, and I've never heard it that way. I like it.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So Chris Savino, he's done a couple things you might have seen. He's an animator, and he's done Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls. More recent is Full House, right? Full House.
The Loud House. Yeah.
Loud House. Sorry. Yeah. Full House is the old TV show, right? With yeah, with the
it's okay
Olsen
to be compared
twins.
with that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like a lot of people's probably seen the stuff that you've done for Nickelodeon and stuff like that, and you've kind of come up to this point where you are now working for something quite different than Nickelodeon, sort of working on your own terms. So I kind of want to just like kind of hear your story about like how you got started in the industry and how you got connected with Nickelodeon, and kind of your lead up to ultimately your conversion and coming to Christ. So I guess we just kind of start there. Like, how did you get into the industry with
Sure.
everything?
This is going back over 30 years now, 1991.
And actually, that was when I was born. So
great. We can talk about your birth year too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, it actually goes like a year or two before that. At the time it was late 1980s, and I had just decided late high school that animation was something that I could do for a living. It hadn't even occurred to me. I drew all my life. I drew comics and cartoons, but I'd always wanted to do a comic strip, and that's where my brain was my entire life. And during high school, I think it was TBS started airing Warner Brothers Looney Tunes cartoons again. And I just kind of rekindled a love for those cartoons. I had watched them my whole life, but never really that much. And it just kind of sparked the notion of like, oh, that's a job somebody did. And it could be a job that I could do. So I shifted into the thought of animation. But at this time, like it was late 80s, and we had things like He-Man and the toy commercial type cartoons, and there's nothing wrong with them. I love them, but it just wasn't my cup of tea as far as style goes. But around that time, there was a cartoon called The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, and it was being done kind of by this group of fantastic cartoonists in Hollywood. And every Saturday morning, I made sure I was up to see it because they were doing something that was at the same time Saturday morning cartoons, but had that feeling and that wackiness and zaniness of those Warner Brothers cartoons just kind of mixed together. And it just struck me like, yes, that's what I want to work on. Maybe cut to like 1989 or 90. And I was at the Detroit Institute of Arts, was having an animation festival. And at that festival, they showed the Ren and Stimpy, I guess, pilot, you could call it, called Big House Blues. And it blew me away. Like everything about it was like, that's what I want to do in cartoons. And it turned out to be the same guy that was doing the Mighty Mouse Adventures. Ralph Bakshi aside, it was John Crispolucci, and just loved it. So like, yeah, this is the guy that I'm paying attention to. And months later, I saw a little article in Animation Magazine saying that Nickelodeon had picked up Ren and Stimpy to series, and that John Crispolucci was producing it out of his Spumco studios on Melrose in Los Angeles. And of course, this is long before the internet. I'm like, how do I get a hold of this guy?
Yeah.
So I went to the library and found a Los Angeles phone book. I guess our library kept up to date on all the phone books.
Wow.
Got his address. I drew a funny drawing, and I wrote a letter that was, honest and a little butt kissy, but and mailed it to him in snail mail. There was no such thing as email yet. And lo and behold, like 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from him, John, and I'm like on the phone that's attached to the wall by a cord, and I'm sweating and jumping, and I'm trying to remain calm on the phone. And he's like, well, I want to see some of your sketchbook stuff, not this finished drawing you sent me, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But so I said, yeah, I'll do that right away. And the next day I went and did something brand new called faxing. And I
Mm-hmm.
had to go to a specialty shop to fax this stuff. So I faxed like 10 pages from my sketchbook.
Mm-hmm.
And he called me, I think a day or two later. So I got your sketches, and offered me a job. Just said, if you want a job, it's like $500 a week if you want to come out. And I'm thrilled. I can't believe like this
Yeah.
19-year-old kid from Michigan is getting a call from John Cristofalusi in California to come work on his show. I was like, yeah, just give me a couple of weeks to get things together. And so mid-April of 1991, I drove out to California, and spent 30 years in the animation industry. But that was my start.
Wow.
And then, you know, as you said, I worked on, this is going to be part of the testimony too, but I just felt so fortunate to be able to work on shows like Ren and Stimpy, like Rocco's Modern Life, Dexter's Lab, Powerpuff Girls, all these excellent shows with excellent creators who were so generous with their time and their talent to sit down and really help like this new kid to learn the ropes. I didn't go to school for it, and I was just sucking it up like a sponge. And but you know, you're working with these guys, Gendy and Craig, and you can't help but want what they have. Like I wanted so bad to sell a show myself. And here they are, like on their second show and third show, and I'm still working for them. And like part of me is like bummed out by that, but part of me is like thrilled because these are great shows to work on with really some of the most talented people in the industry. So, you know, animation's really nomadic. You bounce from one studio to the next. And it wasn't until I gave up in my mind the idea of selling a show, this was many years later, 20 at least, where I thought, you know, people are seeking me out to do work. They trust me to get the show done and do it well. And that's okay. That's a pretty good career to have, I thought. And so I kind of gave up the notion of selling a show. Maybe that wasn't for me. Maybe working on other people's shows was where I was supposed to be. And something about that, I think, just changed my attitude. It's almost like when you give up looking for your wife, girl to meet and date. That's like when you meet them. And it's the same thing that happened. I gave it up. I felt good about it. And it didn't mean I gave up trying to pitch, because you can't help having ideas and you pitch them around. But I think what happened is that desperation was gone, and the only thing left was just like an honest, fearless version of me. And it's not about necessarily having confidence when you go into pitch or whatever, but to not be afraid if they say no again just does something to you. It's like, you're just relaxed. And so I think something comes across in that way where they sense a confidence, even though it wasn't. It was just fearless. And when I pitched The Loud House to Nickelodeon, I was working there on an overall deal, which was just, you're here, work on stuff that we have. If something goes to series, you'd get to work on it or whatever, which was great. And part of my deal was to pitch them ideas for their shorts program. And I pitched The Loud House. And I mean, many people will know it was a show about rabbits, a boy rabbit with 25 sisters, because like the idea that rabbits multiply, and I'm from a big family, etc. But it wasn't until the executive who was in charge of development in the shorts program suggested that I make them human that everything just started to fall into place. Now, granted, I'm not going to lie, I was upset that she suggested this at first, but by the time I left her office and got to my office, I realized she was right. And something about connecting it with human characters suddenly connected it more with my life and my experiences. And things, I mean, miraculously just started falling into place for it. Everything seemed to fit. It was like, seeing a 1,000-piece puzzle, but knowing where every piece was going to go before you even started. And it became a series, and a quite popular series. It was at times #1 on their network next to SpongeBob. It was sometimes switched between one end of SpongeBob, and that was amazing for me to have that after all that time of wanting that. But I did come down to like, there were some people who were like, oh, it's about time you have a show of your own, like very happy for me, which I was thankful for. But in my
Mhm.
mind, I'm like, oh no, it's not about time. It's the right time. Because I felt
Mhm.
like had I pitched that maybe 5 years earlier, I wouldn't have had the experience. I wouldn't have had the wisdom or the knowledge, or just having worked on other shows, made the mistakes that I made on those shows to then correct them on my own and not make those
Yeah.
mistakes again. So it was the absolute right time for that to happen. And it, it, you know, I did a talk once for some students at a school where, you know, about hearing the word no. And I heard no a lot my entire career.
Hmm.
And it's not a bad thing. But, you know,
No.
it only takes one yes to really change your life as an animator or a cartoonist. And
Yeah.
that one yes certainly did.
Wow. Cool. So in that whole process, uh, what what finally changed? Because obviously, like you were basically waiting for this sort of breakthrough to um, make something that you ultimately pitched, and you got that breakthrough. So kind of describe
Mm.
the lead up to say, and I know that there's been a lot of stuff going on right now, especially about the scandal, and stuff that happened that sort of led to your ultimate, uh, I guess, was it firing or letting go out of the Nickelodeon studio? And
Yeah,
so, what was kind of
letting
that
go. Yeah.
process? Yeah,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
this is where the story kind of takes a turn. It's like you've worked your whole life to
hmm,
get this thing, and you really do have it all. It's like you've got your own
yeah,
show, you've got a great family, you've got a wonderful house, and there's
mm-hmm,
something in the brain that's like it's never enough. And this
mm-hmm,
was 2017, almost
okay,
5 years ago now. That you know the Me Too um,
yeah,
movement. I don't even know what word to use there. Kind of
yeah,
exploded, and I
yeah,
certainly got caught up in that. There
mm,
were over the course of my career, there were people that I had um, interactions with,
mm-hmm,
inappropriate kind of texting to one another, had an
mm,
affair, all these things that you know, kind of like the quiet drinker that nobody knows is like, oh, I didn't realize he was an alcoholic.
yeah, yeah,
It was kind of like that, where you know you feel like as long as you're getting away with it, then you're just going to keep
hmm,
doing it, and
yeah,
that caught up to me. And there, you know, of course,
hmm,
these these women spoke up, and Nickelodeon in that is not sweep under the rug. And in October of 2017, had a whole conversation with the human resources lawyers at Nickelodeon, and they just decided we we're just going to go our separate ways. So in a
mm,
matter of about a week, I pretty much lost everything. My ex-wife learned of my
mm,
infidelity, my affair, and my texting, um, and who these people
mm.
were, um, over the internet. Like, it
Oh
was
wow,
one of those things
sucks.
that you only kind of see on in a movie. Right? It's like this is how she found out, and so um, my next 4.5 years have been spent trying to mend that
Mm,
relationship, uh, in a way that was, yes, I kind of betrayed your trust and I betrayed our vows, all of that stuff, trying to work and show the work to not only her but to my kids. And that was the
mm-hmm,
most important thing over the last few years, is just really fixing that. um,
mm-hmm,
so yeah, so not only did I lose all of that, my house,
hmm,
everything,
yeah,
you go from a great salary to zero salary, and
yeah,
the the show that I feel like I worked my entire career trajectory
mm,
towards, the thing that was so personal to me, was taken from me, or I should say I
mhm.
lost it. So to go from everything to zero is where I went in a matter of like a week. And of course, that
Oh wow,
was the frenzy for Me Too, it was all over the news. Like me, like
Hmm.
who am I? Suddenly, like when you see your name show up on CNN of all things, and
Yeah.
Perez Hilton of all things, it
Yeah.
it was devastating for everybody, for my
Mhm.
kids especially, who I had to really sit down and explain to them, like, the things you're hearing, the things people are saying. Here's the
Mhm.
lies. Here's the truth. Here's the
Mhm.
stretches. Here's the gossip. I really had to have these conversations with my children, who were, you know,
Yeah.
young teenagers at the time, things you don't want to talk to your kids about, things you shouldn't have to talk to your kids
Yeah.
about. Here I was trying
Mhm.
to really just like, okay, I'm going to be honest. I haven't been honest, but here it all is. And that was like
Mhm.
first steps towards mending things, is like getting them to trust me
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was like 2000, late 2017. And I should say, if we're going to lead right into, you know, a
Yeah.
testimony, if you don't mind, I can lead right into that.
No,
It
absolutely.
wasn't
Yeah.
until like early 2018 January that, you know, living alone in my studio apartment in Burbank. I hadn't lived in an apartment in 20 years. I
Mm.
had my own house.
Mhm.
Um, Laying in bed because I'm depressed and I feel like I have nothing. And I remember asking out loud, like I remember saying as I stuttered, like, am I like what was I missing in my life that I was constantly seeking more, when I realized looking back just how much I had.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
um, I asked myself out loud, like, am I missing God in my life? Like I remember asking that with such, like, I was incredulous. Like, what is that? What's missing?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I felt like, well, I had a couple Christian friends in the industry who were
Mhm.
still speaking to me,
Yeah.
because at this point nobody's talking to me.
Huh.
And I didn't want to. I was afraid to, but I reached out to them, and just said, "Look,
Mhm.
I'm questioning this now. I don't even know what to do. Like, how do you get into a church or whatever?"
Yeah.
And one friend recommended reading Mere Christianity, which excellent
Okay.
book. And another
Oh, yeah.
friend said, "Hey, I go to this church in North Hollywood. You should come with me on a Sunday and I'll show you what it's all about." And I wasn't ready yet. And I did some deep dive
Mhm.
into, like, is this really what's missing in my life? Is there like a God shaped hole in my heart? And I
Yeah.
decided it was, after reading Mere Christianity, reading some of the Bible, etc. I wasn't religious growing up. Suffice to
Mhm.
say, my family was Catholic, but I
Oh, okay.
did not go through any of the process. I wasn't baptized at birth or have communion, or any of that stuff. So it had been around, and I'd been around it, but never, when it didn't go to church. But
Mhm.
I wouldn't have called myself a Christian at all.
Yeah.
So I was ready to do it, and uh, nervous and scared. One Sunday morning, I went to this church and met them there, and I kid you not, it was like the message on the stage was as if somebody told the pastor who was going to be there, namely me, and what had happened, because it felt
Mhm.
like the message was geared right at me. Like it literally felt like a spotlight just right on me, and the audience disappeared, and it was just him talking to me. And
Yeah.
like in that moment, I'm like, this is. I mean, I wept after that. I
Mm.
knew, like, it was like my answer.
All right, we're back. Sorry for the little glitch there. We just had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are back with Chris Savino and ready to keep on hearing about his uh, testimony and how he came to Christ.
Yeah,
So here we go.
that was the enemy stopping me from giving my testimony.
Yeah.
Just so you know, like Satan came in and crashed the whole system. Um, anyway, I think where I was at was I was asking for a sign, and literally got one. It was a sign on a telephone pole on Magnolia Boulevard in North Hollywood, across from North Hollywood High, and it said, "I am the way and the truth and the life." And it's like I
Really?
knew right then, like I gotta go. Like that was it. Like I asked and you gave it to me. I'm not going to deny
Hmm.
this.
That's
So
crazy.
it was, that was February of 2018, only a few months after just
Mhm.
kind of losing everything, and I realized I'm I've been struggling to find forgiveness from people in my life, but the one person that I'm looking for forgiveness for has been like seeking me my entire life.
Mm.
And I felt like in that moment, like God forgives me. Jesus had died for my sins, and this is my way. This is the truth, and that is my life. And so I just kind of dove into church full time, and
Yeah.
literally, let's see, February, March, April, May 6th of 2018, I was baptized there at that church,
Mm.
and kind of haven't looked back. It's been a life changer. It's been a new life for me. It's kind of shifted my focus on how I perceive the world and how I
Mhm.
treat people, um, and just made me a better person. And I felt like looking back throughout my life, I had mentioned in talking about how lucky I was in all these times in my career to have these specific jobs. And I look back and I was like, oh, that wasn't luck at all. That
Mhm.
literally, I feel like that was God leading me down this path of my life, because
Yeah.
that's way too much luck for one person to have.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and it led me to believe like God's always been in my life, but it
Mm.
wasn't until
Mhm.
I sought Him until I realized He had been seeking me the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really changed. Like I said, it's changed who I am and how I approach things, and it literally is God first in my life. And it was something that I started praying for around this time was maybe, if it
Mhm.
is God's will, I can at some point, and here we are almost 5 years later,
Mhm.
can I, God, use the gifts that you've given me and that I've
Mhm.
hopefully used well throughout my whole life to also um, incorporate my newfound, love and following of Jesus, incorporate
Mhm.
those together and do something with it.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and that brings us kind of to where we are now, if we want to jump into that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I find it now we're yeah, so we can talk about Loor and how you kind of discovered Loor, and we can also talk about like the sort of firestorm that you're going over right now with I think there's like a bunch of Twitter stuff about like, well,
Ah,
Loor, like why are you accepting this guy? And it's like, come on, guys, like if Paul was here today, you wouldn't accept him into your church if that's your standard, you know,
yeah,
and
amen.
so let's talk about that. So how did you
Sure.
discover Lore, and how did that relationship start?
Let me back up to church one more time. It's like
Oh yeah, no,
my
absolutely.
pastor when I moved up to
Mhm.
Campbell, which is in Northern California in the Bay Area. I was going to a small community church there, and the pastor there said to me once, like, your testimony doesn't stop when you've come to Christ; it continues
Mm.
on.
Mhm.
And I always thought that was a beautiful thing to say. And I do believe like when you start to see God working in your life and you start to see those moments, you realize just how often He is working in your life.
Mhm.
And my testimony does continue.
Yeah.
And I get every time I have an opportunity, I do share it, not just my initial testimony of coming to
Mm.
Christ, but the
Mhm.
times where I can't help but share just how
Oh,
good
yeah.
He is. Like to me, like I don't I don't
Mhm.
deserve it, like at all. I don't
Yeah.
deserve it.
No,
But
we
there
don't.
it
Yeah.
is.
Mhm.
And it makes me feel like, well, what are you using me for? Just lead me and I'll do it.
Yeah.
So this was only maybe a month or so ago, maybe a little bit longer. Over the last year, I was living in California, and I was working with another company. I won't name names here, doing a pilot that was kind of a faith-based pilot, and I was
Oh, cool.
excited to be doing that. And I felt like, oh, this is prayers answered for real.
Mm. Mhm.
Um, and it I was planning a move to Texas. I was doing this pilot, and it felt like everything was really lining up. I felt like this is where I was supposed to be going, and this is the work that I'm going to be doing. So it all was really falling into place, and I was feeling pretty good about it. But
Mhm.
not, like I had just moved out here, and then suddenly the pilot fell through. I wasn't working on it anymore, and
Oh man.
this was maybe February of this year, and I was feeling really. I was okay with like not working on a pilot anymore because that's just the way the
Mhm.
industry is. Like you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
But it didn't hit me until like maybe 4 weeks after that oh, wait a minute, I was counting on this work to kind of sustain and provide for my family for like the next year, maybe year and a half or 2 years. Like you count on those things, and suddenly it was
Yeah.
now gone. And I
Oh no.
feel like I just kind of took a nosedive, like spiraled into like
Mm.
depression again. And excuse me, started reaching out to, it was pretty bad. I started reaching
Yeah.
out to my friends at the community Christian church in Campbell, just saying, please, could you just pray for me? This is what I'm going through. I just need some strength to get through this. Help me to see things differently than the way I'm looking at them now with my,
Mm.
my
Mhm.
old heart. Um, and it was in that week, literally that week, where I'd asked them to pray for me. I got an email
Mhm.
from a friend who was helping me out with another faith-based pilot that I was working on my own. It just I felt like I needed to just kind of keep working.
Yeah.
Um, and he's like, "Hey, I just met with this company called Loor TV, Loor,
Mhm.
and I was pitching a show there, but I really think the project that he was helping me out on, and he did a voice
Mhm.
for it. Um, I think that you're a perfect match for them, and I hope you don't mind. I brought you up. I brought up your name, brought up the past, brought up what you're working
Mhm.
on, and said I think you should meet. And I was like, yeah, well, yeah, I'll reach out definitely. But in my
Mhm.
mind, I'm thinking, thank you, God. Like, what? How in the
Yeah.
world did this email just come out of the blue? Like, when I say unexpected, I really mean unexpected. I don't tend to like
Mhm.
over exaggerate things, but it just showed up at the right time. And I try
Mhm.
to recognize those times. Like sometimes
Yeah.
we forget and we're just like, oh, yeah, great. Good things are happening. But I try to say thank you.
Mhm.
And I reached out to Jason Farley of Loor. I emailed him. He's like, "Oh yeah, he mentioned your name. We're interested in your project." We had
Mhm.
a Zoom meeting, and they explained how their method of streaming service is going to work, which was surprising and interesting and exciting
Yeah.
all at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, and so I would say within a matter of 2 weeks of that phone call, they had already had a contract emailed me to sign up to be part of like this early stage of this brand new, like as they say, cancel Hollywood slash Christian
Yeah.
content entertainment streaming service. And
Hmm.
I felt like this is where I think I need to be right
Yeah. Very cool. And so then I guess out of that, like, where did the inspiration for Busted Bible Stories sort of come
now.
from?
Okay.
We could talk a
So
little bit about that.
that's the name of the show. Yeah, Busted Bible
Yeah.
Stories.
Yeah.
I've been a big fan of Rocky and Bullwinkle since childhood.
Mhm.
Um, at the age of 4, you don't get a lot of their jokes. It's over your head, but
Yeah.
excuse me, it's a fun show to watch. Like visually, it's
Mm.
so
Mhm.
appealing, and I just really love the wordplay and the snappiness of the dialogue.
Mhm.
And somewhere in my career, I created a Rocky and Bullwinkle type show called Bigfoot and Gray on the Run, where it was basically Rocky and Bullwinkle on the run from these
Yeah.
agents of the Men in Black,
Mhm.
and it was written to be like in that vein, the play on words and the witty
Mhm.
dialogue and the fast pace and the narrator. It was just kind of like my love letter to this type of show, which
Mm.
no one was
Mhm.
doing. And of course,
Yeah.
no one's doing it because Jay Ward had already done it. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, it was a pitch and it didn't go anywhere. And, for me, I feel like my ideas are so few and far between that I feel like I
Mhm.
really have a passion for
Mhm.
that. I put it on the shelf after it failed as an animation pilot, and then I took it back down because I'm like, there's something about this. Anyway,
Mm.
I did
Mhm.
a graphic novel version of it, and I self-published it on Amazon's, publishing on demand, and
Mhm.
just it felt good to get it out of my system. But
Yeah.
so when I was doing this pilot for this other animation studio, this faith-based one, I just had as my list of pitches to them, like I had like 11 different ideas, just one simple sentence that said, uh, Jay Ward does the Bible. That's all it was.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what the idea was yet. But
Yeah.
while they picked a different idea, I started, cultivating this other one in my head and kind of jotting down notes. And I just happened to look up um, Sherman and Peabody,
Yeah.
Mr.
Yeah. Yeah.
Peabody and Sherman, which is they go back in time in their Wayback Machine, and the comically awry historical moment they have to fix. I'm like, that's pretty easy. I think the first one I watched was about Geronimo. And I watched it, and afterwards I realized I didn't know Geronimo had to sign some sort of treaty. But that's what this episode was about. They had to get him to sign this treaty. And it occurred to me like, oh, there's actually some educational value in here. You're learning something about a historical character, even though it's comedy, really over the top comedy. There was like a shred of education in it. Like, that's what I need to do. I need to have these characters go back and fix a Bible story, but within that comedy, you get actual biblical passages or historical Bible stories of where you learn who these characters are, what they're supposed to be doing, and why it's gone wrong, etc. And just like, and again, not over exaggerating, just like when that executive suggested the Loud House be human characters, everything started to fall into place. It was the same thing where, oh, that's what I need to do. And suddenly everything started falling into place. Like, well, who are my main characters? What's their means of getting back in time? How do I put some education into this? And it all literally, like, I wrote the first script in a day. I'm not a fast writer by any means, but it just kind of came out of me. Like, oh, that's how you should feel. Like that passion for something I had not felt in quite some time. But for it to just be coming out and feeling so good about it, I feel like this is right, this is right, this is right. So after I lost that pilot at that other company, I'd reached out to my voiceover friend who's also a Christian, and I said, hey, could you do this voice for me? And it turns out, of course he did. He was more than happy.
Yeah.
I was going to put together an animatic to maybe try and raise money myself to make a pilot. Because that's where I was. I was in my life. Studios weren't calling me. People weren't calling me. People weren't saying, hey, do you want this work or that work? We'd love to have you. That just went away. And I just felt like I needed to do something myself. But it was because he did that voice, and then he went and had that meeting with Loor, that he said, I think you should talk to these guys. And so I just happened to have all of this material ready for them. It wasn't like I've got this idea, I'll come back in a few months. It was like, here it is. And they were more than happy to add it to their slate of shows that they're looking to fund. Wow.
So I guess the next question that everybody's wanting to know, I guess, would be like, so what's the timeline for like release of the animation?
I wish I could say tomorrow. So Loor, as you said, it's very early on, and the way they're working is not, the cancel Hollywood aside, their actual structure of how they're working it is, if you're a subscriber to their streaming service, your subscription money, whatever it is, $10, $20 a month, you get what's called loot. That's applicable, where you go on their website and they go, here's all the projects that we're funding. And you get to apply your loot to whatever projects you see, like whatever you want to watch, you're bringing it to life by funding it. And of course, that's going to take a lot of subscribers, and it's going to take some time. I think it's a pretty interesting thing. Like, how many times do you turn on a streaming service, again, not naming names, and go, gosh, there's nothing for me on here as you're clicking through all the shows. And there's so many shows, like, how can there be nothing for me? But here it is. Like, if you're a Christian and you're looking for entertainment that does not have a lot of the agenda-driven kind of woke politics jammed down your throat, this is the place for you, and you can find it as a child, as that kind of sweet spot of like teen to 20s area, where it seems like, especially Christian content, is not made for you. It's made for really young kids or older audiences with the Christian or the faith-based movies. It's like that sweet spot. So, it's not just, as they call it, like Hallmark style movies. There's going to be horror, there's going to be comedy, there's going to be drama, there's romance. There's going to be epic, somewhat R-rated materials as well. But Christian content, good Christian content that I think it's been sorely kind of lacking, we'll say. So they're in a beta phase right now where they've got a couple projects that are like funding through beta testers of the service. So each week you get an email saying, hey, you've got loot available. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm going to go spend my loot. And I apply my money to each of those projects. And it turns out, like, there was one project about almost like a ghost hunter type documentary. Like, oh, that's for me.
Yeah.
That's what I'm putting my money
Dark
towards.
Holler.
But there
Yeah.
was another one, a second one on there about Teach All Nations, and I was like, well, I'm going to put some money to that too, because well, why not? And it turned out Teach All Nations turned out to be fascinating and so well done. I was impressed and surprised by how much it spoke to me. Like, well, that just opened a new part of my mind of like, yeah, this is stuff that I was missing in my life, information or material or even just content, to use that word. But I felt really good. Like, oh, I'm glad I put some money towards that.
Yeah.
So currently they're in their beta phase, and they've got a list of maybe 7, 8, 9 projects on their website, Loor.tv, where you can see which shows or series or movies that are going to be open funding as soon as they come out of beta, and actually get subscribers. So when that happens, could be next week, it could be 6 weeks from now, I don't know. But the early subscribers are just going to have to know that they're actually a part of something early. And animation takes a little bit of while to produce. So, if say Busted Bible Stories gets fully funded for the 4 episodes that I'm hoping to make, it would take X amount of time for the funding to happen, and then X amount of time to start producing them and getting them out. So if you're early, you'll have to wait for them to start being produced. But according to my schedule, you'll get 2 new episodes every couple of weeks is the way they'll start delivering. So once they start delivering, you get them a little bit more consistently. And, if a year and a half from now, God willing, I'm able to make them, and then you are just new to Loor and you join it, you've got all of them right there. You can just start watching them right away, just like you would on any other streaming service. So we're really early on in it. And I hope that I could say I could start producing them this summer. That's my hope, but I just don't know. And currently doing something like this, talking about it, getting the word out, getting people talking about it, and which, leads unfortunately into people, Loor mentioning that they're working with me, and then people who just are trolls, but also there are people who are Christians who are saying, hey, this guy had this thing happen years ago. I don't know I don't know the truth. And this is all hearsay, but I'm going to point this out to you and try and get Loor to, cancel working with me. And it's a shame. It's a shame that other Christians would be so willing to be, as you said, if Paul was trying to join the church today, he'd be kicked out. It's tough, but it was so heartwarming, I think, and so reaffirming of not only my faith, but Christians in general, that the gentlemen who are running Loor, co-founders of Loor, you don't have to worry about that at all.
All right, we've unglitched again here with us, and we'll just continue our conversation about I think we're almost at the Twitter peeps, so we'll just
there was undoubtedly there are gonna be people coming out of the woodwork who not only see my name and don't want to see me have some sort of new opportunity or second chance or whatever you want to call it, of course came after Loor to say, hey, look who you're working with. We don't agree with this. You should drop him, or whatever it is. And that's unfortunate, but that's going to happen. And those people, I think, speak a lot of the time out of school. They don't know the whole story. They only know what they've read online or what they think they know, using some words that are untrue. And I feel like part of me is like, no, that's not the way it is. And I want to type up a big response to all that. And part of it is like, no, I need to just let that stuff go. Let those people be unhappy with their lives, if this is all that they're focused on, and move forward. And like I said, it's been great because the guys at Loor stood up straight away and responded to those people and just kind of shut the whole thing down. And after a day, it was done. And I'm grateful for that. I really am. And I'm thankful for them for being so not only supportive, but just Christians in general. Like, that's what we should be. We need to be the forgiving type of people who, as my church puts it, everybody's invited to the party. So there's going to be some of that, and there will be some pushback. But my hope is that people not just pretend like things didn't happen, but understand as Christians that things do happen. That we're all sinners. We all screw up. We all make poor decisions. But that Jesus died for us, and that the reason he died for us is that so we can have a relationship with God in his perfection. And that's what I need to focus on. And just thank him every day for this, not only the opportunities he puts before me, but the people that he's put in my path. I am so grateful for. I'm so aware of that. And not only the people he's put in my path, but certainly the people he's taken out of my path.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. And Loor is in beta, and we're hoping to go live soon enough. And hopefully, there are other animated shows that are coming, some that are surprising and are going to blow some people away, and some that are a little bit more on the younger end of the spectrum, which are even surprisingly different from all the other, Christian content out there. And I think that that's a great place to start. I really think some of these early shows are going to really set the stage for what Loor is trying to do with Christian content, even though I don't like the word content. Let's say entertainment.
Yeah, entertainment. Yeah.
Content seems disposable.
No, yeah, exactly.
So that's where we are. And I'm, I've been, as I'm waiting for the real Loor subscription to start, I've just been chipping away at some scripts to kind of get ahead. Part of it is there's a delicate balance between, well, how much money do I want to raise to make this? I want to raise enough that I can pay people to do the work and pay them the proper amounts, certainly. At the same time, I think some people's eyes will go pop when they see like, oh, animation costs that much to do. So there's a balance of like, well, how much do I ask for to not make it scary? But also be honest to the people that I'm asking to do some work for me. So I'm taking on a lot of the work myself. And I'm trying to be honest with myself too, like how much can I really do while also trying to wrangle all these people. But we'll find out soon, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Yeah. So do you have like a small team that you're working with already, or is it still just basically you at this point?
No, just me so far. And of course the gentlemen who have done the voices for me.
Yeah.
But I've slowly started to reaching out to people on LinkedIn or Instagram, not just saying, hey, I have work. I haven't done that yet, but just like, hey, let's connect. And I'm really impressed and surprised that there are so many people who say yes. And that makes me feel so good. And so hopefully when the time comes, I can start reaching out to people and build a small team. Hopefully Christian people who understand, who want to also contribute to making really fun and funny Christian entertainment, especially animation. But it doesn't have to be, of course, like I said, like Jesus died for all of us. So everybody is invited to this table. If you'll have me, if you'll want to work with me. And I do believe that's the point, is you have a choice. If you want to work, awesome. If you don't, that's okay too. That's absolutely your choice. And I accept it either way. So hopefully soon enough, I'll be doing things like this where we get to talk about it. But at the same time, on their site, build the blog of weekly updates of behind the scenes, who's working on it, development, scripts, some recording sessions, so people can kind of see how these shows are made, so they can see hopefully where their subscription money is going to, and feel like they've got like a all access pass to actually being a part of making it. Yeah.
No, I think that's really, really cool. So I just want to thank you so much, Chris, for coming on the X Garage show and just talking about your faith and Loor.
Anytime.
And it'd be great to have you on again, and as things progress and as things develop. Yeah.
Okay.
Very cool. So thank you for joining us, everybody, and X Garage.